Okay, I'm seeing bars. All right then. Okay, and this is this is episode number 272. It looks like. Oh wait, no, sorry, that's not right. Two. No, 273. 272 is the wrestling episode that hasn't been released yet. Which should be going up today. Do I have that ready? Did Mike get that back to me? Hold on, let me look. I just realized I kind of forgot about it. Let me see. He has podcast files. He's had it ready for several days. Okay, all right, I'll get this released after the podcast. So, all right, so okay, all right. 1, 2, 3. Hello, folks. This is Super NES episode number 273 coming to you this time. As always, I'm Greg. He is Joe. And as always, for the last several years, partly because it's a nice way to recap games covered, and partly because it's the holidays, we're super busy, we're doing our usual year in review episode to wrap up 2025. So, like I said before, this is, it's fun to do. It's also easy. I freely admit not having to research does save up considerable time on this. Joe and I were actually talking about this a little bit before off mic before the podcast began. We actually take slightly different approaches to coming into this. I don't even review any notes coming to this episode because to me this is a great chance to think about games you covered recently and be like, what actually stuck out to you? Because as I'm sure that you'd agree with me, Joe, and most game players out there would agree with, a great game is something that sticks with you for like months or years after you played it. There's something about the game, either whether it's like the gameplay or the story or the music that just really makes a mark on you. It can be good, can be bad, can be kind of bleh, but it's those games that really make an impression upon you that are the ones you're most likely to think about, for a long time to come. And so, to me, this is a good way to look at something long after the fact and be like, okay, what do I actually remember about this game? Because I don't remember anything about it, it's probably not that good. Especially for a catalog with the Super NES that has such a huge library that this one did. So, counting the episode not yet released, the wrestling episode which is going up today, and also the boys episode that George and Joe did for me about a year ago because I was super busy with other personal stuff going on. Looks like we have about 23 episodes to cover that we recorded last year, which is not bad. I haven't looked at the list, but it's like, average is 2 episodes a month, 24, a little bit under. But I mean, everything going on for us, that's not too bad. So I think it's pretty much a pretty average, typical release rate for us. So speaking about the bonus episode, I realized again, Joe told me off mic he didn't review his notes on this one, but it's like I just said, here's a chance to see how the game stuck with you. Because I was having personal issues that kept me from recording the podcast for a while. They were kind of bang out a special episode for us. Japanese, this one's really hard to say. It looks like GSP Kami Jirashi wa Nice Body, which is another game from the what was the name of the franchise in Japan? It's like the same franchise that Bad Street. It's the same franchise that River City Ransom came from. I don't remember what the Japanese name of the franchise is though. Yes, that sounds right. Okay, yeah. So there were 2 of those games in Super NES, I think, if I remember correctly. And this was the better one, I believe, from what like the review said. Okay. Oh, I actually thought it was George. Maybe because you were thinking about. Okay, maybe. Okay, okay, yeah, my bad. I think I was. I probably got. I probably got confused because the original plan was to record with him, but then you had to find somebody else. Uh, January was so chaotic last year that I'm not surprised that I didn't really that I didn't like know. I just like okay, here's the episode, throw it up. But so anyway, yeah. I've actually meant to check out some more games of the franchise because I've been a cheer for this because I actually really enjoyed River City Ransom as a kid. I thought it's a very quirky, short but kind of fun NES game. So what do you remember about this one then, George? I'm sorry, Joe. Got him on the brain now. See, I told you, but. Yeah. 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 Speaking of. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 I don't know exactly when you actually recorded this. I think it may have been 2024 that you actually did record this, but yeah. Well, okay, sorry. So 2023 actually got recorded, but it got released in 2024, which is why I'm including this. So, but yeah, speaking about Japanese only games, like we covered Secret of Mana on the podcast recently, and the streamer I watch currently playing Trials of Mana, which is which is the third game in the franchise that never got a release that never got a Western release back in the day. But the ROM for it was one of the first games. I remember this was a big deal. This is that game was one of the first big Japanese RPGs to get translated by fans and then get released over here. The game finally got an official release as part of the collection a few years ago from Square, which we got the name Trials from. But yeah, we should definitely cover that game of like some point too, because it's really impressive just how much step up from Secret that game is, like in every aspect. And I think, as we mentioned in the podcast for about Secret, Shroud didn't come out here because it would have been like too expensive to bring over, like 2 hour translate. It was a big game pack. It was 4 megabytes. So there's numerous reasons for it. So, but yeah. Speaking about Japanese games, yeah, I agree with you about that. So. The next episode is also going to be a little bit hard to cover because we decided to wrap up for our 250 special. We decided to bang out a whole bunch of quote unquote bad games for the console. At least games that had a reputation from fans nowadays as being bad games. I think we covered about 10 games. 11, 12 titles, yeah. So, I really don't remember too much specifically about the games covered. I just remember thinking that, some of the games did live up to the reputation as being a bad game. Like Pit Fighter, for example, is atrocious on the system. But other games really are not that bad. And we use the chance to kind of spin about how fan hates we used to get on games these days. Like you really should give a game a fair shake. A lot of bad games aren't as bad as the internet makes them out to be. So if you want more specific details, I would highly encourage everybody to check that episode out. It came out kind of in January, February, when people were so busy with things, so it may have gotten overlooked. So I do highly recommend checking out that podcast, that episode because it was kind of fun. It was a chance to bang out. Joe and I were also saying last week. Technically, if you count those games, we covered more games this year than the other previous year. So. Yeah, it was a lot this year, so. Mm. Yeah, pretty impressive. So yes, some of them got covered better than others, but did you also include the speaking of our bad games, we can talk about it here also, Joe, because it kind of fits. Since long time listeners of the podcast may also remember our original plan was also to cover. Was it hard driving this year as well? Also, Joe, yes. The bad games episode, yes, yeah, yes. So, yeah, that was the bad game, yes. True. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Super Ninja Boys where our regular coverage started. So it gets a bit easier, it gets a bit easier to recap about that. Yeah, we covered this one because the game recently got added to the Super NES emulation games on Switch. So. Why I don't know because it's not that great of a game, but it's one of those games that's really ambitious in idea. The game really has some fun ideas, like the whole like going around the map, kind of like a light RPG aspect, like like the battles, the side scrolling action battles that take place every now and then. Games have done this for me before in the past with great success. I don't know what happened here, but it just did not work very well, unfortunately. Yep. One of the main weaknesses about the game, I do remember, it's very slow. It's a very like slow game to play and hard. It's like hard to control. So, I think we even said the Japanese version of the game like runs faster and therefore is a better experience. So if you're curious about the game, check out the Japanese original instead. So there's not much text in the game. I mean, there's a story, but it's a very forgettable, silly story. So you're not really missing anything out but playing in Japanese. So. Uh, Next up was next next up was our coverage about the two Micro Machine games that came out with the system. I never had a Micro Machine because Micro Machine myself because by the time they came out, I was a little bit too old to be collecting that stuff. I had like Matchbox and Hot Wheels as a kid instead, but But yeah, so I remember the first game being very good. The second game not being quite as solid, but still like decent play. So good graphics. Pretty faithful to the whole idea of the Micro Machine toys. Right. Yep. Okay. Yeah, yeah. If I remember, the Super NES version didn't really differ too much from the NES version, except for the version, except for graphics and additional cars and races. Yeah, new tracks, better tracks, I think, even on Super NES game. Than with the NES track the NES one had. Even the NES one did have some good tracks as well. But so the next one we covered was one the game I had nostalgia for, but I played this back when the system was brand new. Draken, which was a very early Super NES release. Not launch game, but very soon after launch game. Like Nintendo Power back in the day did like special 50 games coming out with the system with launch or shortly after the system, and most of those games actually did get released within that time frame. And Draken, Draken was one of those games, and Draken was a very ambitious for its time, like first person. Partly first person, like first person like dungeon, which was very present with Super NES for 1991. So, and then you also and then when you in state of first person when you went into combat, it was kind of real time combat where you could choose your character to do an attack or do magic or whatever. And then when you actually explore the dungeons, that went to side scrolling, which I still like the game. I recognize now the flaws the game has. It can be very slow. It can be very confusing. It's a tough game for sure. But the music, the graphics are still pretty good. I think it's still a pretty decent adventure game for what it is. And anybody looking for a challenge, a really difficult old school adventure game, I can still recommend this one. I know I have friends who hate this game. It's definitely one of those games that love it or hate it. It definitely is a very controversial title in the system. But I will always defend it because I think even nowadays it's still a decent game to play. Yep. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Fair. Yeah. Like I said, the game's even like I said, even today, the game's still very controversial. So, Yeah, fair enough. Um, Next up was Battle Meadow, which I believe was your pick, Joe, and I honestly don't remember too much about this game. Maybe you can start off with this one. Oh, yeah, this was a LucasArts developed game, wasn't it? There was a big studio that, yeah, I thought there was a big studio that developed this game. Okay. Oh wait, no. Oh, okay, yeah, now I remember this. Yeah, this is the ship shooter. Right, no, yeah. Yeah, Tour Limited did the music like this game. So, yep. So, okay, yep. Now I remember this. Yeah, different game coming up. Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's like the game's not horrible. It's just a very, like Joe said, Joe said, and as just confirmed by me, it's a very forgettable average space shooter for the system. I mean, if you're, by all means, if you're a fan of space shooters, but check it out because at least at least you have fun at least you have a fun time bopping along to the music. Like you're playing the game, but unless you're like a big fan, unless you're like a big fan of shooters, yeah, this one's like pretty forgettable. So we talked about Draken a moment ago. Now it's the sequel, Dragon View, which was actually not developed by the same not developed by the same developers. Developers. It would actually be a different company. But the only thing, because of that, it really doesn't have too much in common with Dragon. About the only thing that keeps it common, is that same first person perspective when you're out and about in the world. Pretty much everything else in the game is different. So it's a very different game. Generally speaking, people like this game overall better than Dragon, and I can see why. The story's better. It makes more sense. The gameplay is smoother. It's a little bit it was like more fast paced. I like this game about as much as Dragon. I think they're both fun games in their own right, in their own ways. So yeah, I can recommend this game. Again, if you're interested in checking out a secure game, both Draken and Dragon View have gotten re-released on Steam. By the way, I do remember that. So you can get those games for you can get those games like for cheap. In fact, I think at the time I was recording this, this is supposed to be released. Yeah, you have time still. You should have time still. If you listen to this right when it comes out, the Steam year-end sale should be going on. So I'm sure you can get those games on there for like a pittance of a price if you're curious. But anyway, yeah, Joe kept his hand. He didn't love this one either. So. Yeah. 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 All right. Well, well, because of all that, I threw you a bone. Like next games, like went back to wrestling. So we actually covered two games, in this podcast because they're really different. Because they really didn't differ too much like each other. WrestleMania and Raw. Joe, you can take a point on these ones because this is your specialty. Yep. Right. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think those games were fun. They definitely, I know we talked about before in the podcast. Like, is anybody actually going to go back to a 30-year-old wrestling game at this point? Probably not. But when they came out, they were very impressive games for sure. So, good graphics, good music, pictures of the actual wrestlers involved, that kind of stuff. So, the moves, the finishers, yeah, very polished. Very polished type project. The only thing I really have, the only thing I remember really having an issue with, like, was controls. They weren't the best in the world, unfortunately, for doing certain things. But yeah, yeah. So next up, we have a really solid game. In fact, I probably would say one of the best games we covered in the podcast this year, the awesome arcade port of Sunset Riders by Konami. This is a great game. It's fun in the arcade, and Konami did a great job putting arcade games to the system, and Sunset Riders is no exception. It's a very fast-paced, fun, challenging Western-themed shooter where you get to go on, horseback and trains and going through towns and whatnot, just shooting at bad guys. It's like, what else could you ask for, like a classic like 90s arcade game? Yes. They had to make a few compromises to the game to make it work, but yes, but it's not that bad. Just a few minor things here and there. I don't. I know we looked at this, I remember. I'm sure we checked this out when we recorded this episode. I don't think. Oh, okay, yeah. The arcade game is available. The arcade game is available in a collection. If I want to get it these days, I guess the arcade game would be the way to go. But the Super NES version is still very, very solid. And definitely when it came out, it was an excellent port. All of Konami's arcade ports came out extremely well. Like Turtles. It's just like another great example. What was another like Konami arcade game that they ported over? I'm drawing a blank like right now, but I'm sure there are others. But anyway. Next up we covered, our first guest episode, our first guest episode of the year. My online friend Doom joined us for this one to cover the last game published by Nintendo for the system in North America, Kirby's Dream Land 3. So, Kirby, I don't think needs introduction. This is like, this was kind of a return to the roots. I know that the three of us talked about how different it was since some of the Kirby games that come out at the time, the pros and cons about that. But it's just pretty much an updated version of the classic Kirby's Dream Land 1 and 2. If you enjoy those games, you'll love this one. Very cute, great graphics, fun gameplay, challenging. There's also the challenge is also increased because there's also optional things you can find in each stage to unlock to unlock a hidden reward at the end of the stage, and therefore get all those. You also get a bonus at the end of the game. So definitely something you definitely replayability for this one. You expected a late Super NES title like this, 95, 96, 97 to be very impressive, and this game definitely delivers in spades. Oh, yep. All right, well, no worries. Just do your best. Start up again, and I'll just have to, and hopefully our editor can do it. Your second file recording? Okay, all right. Okay, that's fine then. Just start off with I got thoughts on Kirby Dream on 3 of the like Yeah, nope, definitely agree. Seems like a very fun game to include to have these days. So, this is not available on the Switch last time I checked, unless they've added to the system since then. So, which is a shame. Yeah, definitely like a very fun game. So, we joked before a bit ago, Joe, about how covering X number of games in a podcast like or whatever. While technically we did cover the most games in the bad games episode, we didn't really spend too much time talking about them because it was a very shotgun approach. You want to talk about an episode where we actually went into a deep dive at the games? This episode here is the one that has the record because we covered 4 games in depth with this one. So-called Hero Games, Hero Games Entertainment Series. I'm using the name Hero Game because that's what the publishers themselves call the games, because these games were designed for kids to help them to learn more about how conditions that maybe affected them. Also, like diabetes, etc. While also presenting it in a fun package for kids to play, because obviously this information is important for kids to learn, but it's kind of boring. So putting up in an entertaining format helps. They still use that format today. There are modern versions of this game available out there for kids that are still being made and used. So this is a really groundbreaking series in many ways. We recognize the fact that it was important for what it did, and it seemed to, these games. We also covered bad games recently. These games are mocked by people as being bad games, and yes, they are very shallow. But you also have to keep in mind, who this is meant for. This is meant for little kids. It's specifically meant to help them learn about a condition that they have and go on from that. It's no, they're not great games, but for what they did. I think they were very impressive. And all the reviews they could find the time periods from parents and focus groups seemed to indicate that they were happy with the games, and the games did what they set out to do. So this really did set the foundation for the modern games of this type we have nowadays to help kids the same conditions. So these are also pretty rare games because most of them were not sold in stores. They were either stores they were given away by the companies or whatever. So they're pretty expensive. they're pretty expensive if you're a collector. They definitely are a gem in your collection. You've managed to snag a complete in box version of these bad boys. You have anything you want to add on to that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are more edutainment system games in the system. So we probably will cover. I'm warning you now, Joe. I probably will pick one or two of them to cover for next year. So maybe we can do both Mario games in the same episode, perhaps. But yeah, there's also Where in the World is Carmen San Diego that could be covered, and probably some other ones too. I can't think of like right now. So there's definitely some other games out there. But next up is a game that to follow up like the shooter for the system again, space shooter. We already had covered Super R-Type previously in the history of the podcast. Not a very good game for numerous reasons. R-Type 3 was one of the later follow-ups of that game, specifically designed for Super NES, unlike Super R-Type, and man, as it showed. It's amazing the difference of like a few years, and like a game being developed for the ground floor system can do for performance. Much better game. It plays well. It looks great. The music's solid. I always will prefer the Gradius series, but the R-Type series is also very good, and R-Type 3 is probably the best R-Type game available in the system. This is a solid game. If you enjoy space shooters, there's definitely one to check out even nowadays, I think. Yes, indeed, for sure. So, definitely worth checking out. Things like old school shooter games. Um, next up is Incredible Hulk, which I'm pretty sure was Joe's pick because of the comic book connection. I do like Incredible Hulk quite a lot. He's not had a lot of great games, unfortunately. Kind of like Superman, unfortunately, has also not had a lot of great games over the years, and this is a pretty forgettable game in many ways, sadly, again, because of that. Because we said in the podcast, like Superman, Hulk suffers the problem of you got an overpowered person who can crush everything in his path. How do you make that fun in the game? It's definitely a difficult challenge. Developers tried by having the whole power up system, the system to go through the game where you power up Bruce to become the Hulk and whatnot. Graphically, the game looks great. Music wise, I remember being solid. The gameplay. The gameplay is fine. It's not horrible. It just is very bleh, I guess the best way I can describe it. Yeah. So developers tried. I'll give them credit for that, but it could have been worse. But just not, unfortunately, like I said, the Hulk's not a very, Hulk's a very hard person to put into a game. I think, I think both of us were in agreement in the podcast that the later, was it the PS2 Hulk game was probably the best one featuring the Hulk. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I agree with that definitely. Yeah, because that one really felt fun. Because like that game, with that game, you're like slinging around tanks, you're knocking down helicopters. It's like all kind of Armageddon destruction going on there. So it's it's great. It's not believable at all, but it's great fun to play. Yes, exactly. So, but next up was another like looking to a very popular. We covered a bunch of like popular pop culture games this year. It seems like, but because this one here, we were looking at the Simpsons games for the system, where they're like where again 4 games in one episode. So. Like Joe mentioned, altogether almost 50 games we covered this year. So even the podcast number may be slightly down. The games was at all-time peak. So I really don't have too much specifically to say about these games. It's like they're good games. Some are better than others. I mean, they capture the look and feel the look and feel like the cartoon extremely well. If you're a fan of The Simpsons, I think the games are still worth checking out. But they're better. They're better than the NES games. I can say that much. But it's like I remember like. Krusty's Funhouse was definitely kind of the weakest of the games for us because that was just a port from a previous puzzle game that just simply shoehorned in to give it like Simpsons characters. I'm trying to remember which one did you say was your favorite? Because I remember you and I had the same favorites. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That was the worst game of the 4. Yes. Yes. That was pretty. Yeah. That's pretty atrocious. Yeah, definitely. Bart's Nightmare, I think, is definitely the best game. Like the Hulk, there are better Simpsons games that come out to the Simpsons games came out to later systems, but these are better than the NES games. So I mean, if you are a Simpsons, like you're a Simpsons fan, you can have some fun. Has fun with playing these for sure. But so we went from so we went from like one pop culture icon to another pop culture icon with the Flintstones, where we covered we covered two games. One game being based off the live action movie, the first live action movie which just come out, and the other one being based off the cartoon. Both of them are platformers, but they play very differently. Like one of them had an overhead map system, kind of like a board game feel almost to it, or the other was just like a straight platformer. They're solid platformers. Again, they're all right. They're not great. They're not horrible. It's like if you enjoy the Flintstones, you can have some fun with this. We both agree that the cartoon-based game was better. So they're all right. Yeah. They also tried to scan in the characters' faces like the movie, like under the game too. Also, which looks odd, but yeah. So certainly one of those ideas that seemed good at the time, but in hindsight has not aged very well. There's plenty of those in gaming history, so that's why they're hardly unique. So yeah. um, Anyway, then we're getting toward yeah. So at this point, then we're getting toward the last 4 months of the year or so, and I think that we finished the year, I think, overall pretty strongly, Joe. I think most of these games that we have left we at least thought. We at least gave passable marks to of not like high marks. So I think like the year did finish at a higher note for sure. So starting off with you're starting off with well. Definitely mixed bag with a mixed bag with the Super NES ports of the classic computer games Prince of Persia 1 and 2. Prince of Persia was handled by Konami because of how popular the game was. They actually got the rights to port the game over, and the game ported over brilliantly. As a matter of fact, they actually added in like new stages on the Super NES version of the game. So this definitely is a wonderful version of the game to play, and one of the best versions of Prince of Persia you can play even to this day, because Prince of Persia has still been remade over the years and whatnot. The second game, however, different developer handled it, and I don't know what happened. They just did not do a good job with the port. It's slow, it's clunky, it's hard to play. It's atrocious, unfortunately. But looking great is the best thing you say about it. It does, but and again they tried to improve. Expand the game from its PC original, but. Yeah, definitely night and day as far as like differences between how these games got ported over the Super NES. Yeah, I mean, the second game is still very popular. Don't get me wrong, but the first game is the one that people have all the nostalgia for. Whether it's like good or bad nostalgia, because you die a lot in those games. Yeah. So, but yeah. So, and of course, these are nothing like the modern day Prince of Persia games, which are fun, but they're very different games because they play totally differently than these two games did for sure. So, next up is interesting. Speaking about ports. Again, recovering ports. This time recovering the ports of the classic computer games Wizardry to the Super NES. Wizardry, as we said at the time, was one of the very first big computer RPG series, which influenced a lot of games to come down the pike after them. There was like 8 games made altogether in the franchise. Very late in Super NES's lifespan. I think Joe said. It was like 2000 for Japan. They actually. They took the 3 NES ports of Wizardry because Wizardry 1, 2, and 3 had already been ported to the NES. Only the first 2 games came out in North America, but all 3 had been ported to the NES in Japan. Upgraded the games again, and then released them as a bundle cartridge on the Super NES. So we have here the curious case of a port of a port, basically. So, and for 2000. Toward the end, very few games got released in Japan for the Super NES that late. I mean, I think the last game to come out in Japan was like 2003 or something like that. But I have to look to confirm that. But yeah, for this to come out so late in Japan was was definitely a shock. And this game, Wizardry games, is still very popular today. So this game has been fan translated, which is how we played it. Yeah. Very good ports of the games, however. I mean, definitely because original games like from the mid to late '80s, and definitely they're very dated by today's standards. So the console ports gave them like better graphics, better music, better everything really. If you're curious to play these games, this is definitely a great place to start. Having said that, there is a recent remake of the first game on Steam you can get, which is also excellent. But as far as actual like ports of the second and third game, the Super NES version still I think is the preferred way to go. Like this collection. I remember I was more enthusiastic about these games than you were, Joe. But you didn't hate them either, like when I remember. Okay, well, fair enough. um, Next up is this game. We mentioned before. So we mentioned before how Dragon was a very controversial game in the system. There's people with, there's people on both camps like love it and hate it. This game also strongly fits in that controversial category. Lesser the Unlikely, which is a very interesting take upon trying to do an adventure game on the system, where you play a very not hero at all character, and the developers went all in on that system because it's like Lester gets scared by creatures. He's hard to control. He's not very brave, and you have to like muddle this like slow, clumsy, scary geek basically through the game. To his credit, he does improve and get better and stronger as he gains courage throughout the game. But this is really another case for me where it's like the developers had a great idea, but the system and the limitations just did not allow them to be able to do this in the best possible way. We have it's a playable game, but it's not. But if you want to, but you have to go to the game with a certain mindset, knowing what to expect. Anybody who wants typical adventure slash action game is not gonna enjoy this one bit, which is why the game has so many bad reviews to this day, I think. But because it's just a very, if you can go to the game with the right mindset, you can certainly have some fun with this. Like I said, it's a very ambitious game for what it is, but I just think that I can certainly understand why the game gets all the hate these days. Yeah. There was talk about there was talk a while back about about them trying to revive the idea to make a more modern version of the game. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon your point of view, that didn't go. That didn't go anywhere. But I agree with you. A modern take of this game would definitely be interesting. Um, Next up, we had another compilation of games. Was this 2 or 3 games we covered? Yeah. I thought it was 2 games. Yeah, I was thinking the third game. The third game I was thinking about you left for a different system. But yeah, so yes, yeah. So basically, the released game. I mean, again, this is a game that was targeted the like specific group. Young girls, and as and as a result, the games get bashed by people today because of that. But again, it's like it's not bad for what it is for that certain mindset. Now you can make the hard argument that the game should be in the game should be in the game should be made in the first place because now we've kind of gotten away from the idea of like gender type in games, but back then they were still trying to tap into that market a lot. So and Barbie was and still is very popular, very popular as a franchise. So so like so basically both games are just basically like a bunch of mini games thrown together. Pretty good graphics and music, music like what it was. The second game was apparently finished, but didn't get released did not get released. I think because probably the license probably ran out was the conclusion that we drew based upon the research. There wasn't anything official online saying anything why the game got canceled, but that's our like best guess. So. It's hard to recommend these games nowadays, unless you're like a Barbie collector. But because there are better games for young kids these days, I think, than these games. But they're not awful. Again, these are games that games that do not deserve the hate they get, because people have to realize who and what they're meant for in the time period. But it's like it's so easy just to label things nowadays without doing any kind of critical thought on it. But again, if you approach the game from the mindset of who they're for, when they were made, and how it was done, you can see that okay, it's fine for what it is. But I think even little girls would have gotten bored of this game in short order. But got back to playing Mario Kirby or whatever. But still, I mean, they're not awful games. So next up is a game I picked. I remember because I never heard of the game. I was curious about it. I did not know the time. I did not know the time that the game was actually based off of a movie. Movies, to be fair, actually, because I kind of took ideas like both movies. The game is called Warlock, based upon two relatively unknown but still somewhat popular movies, based upon just like as the title implies, like you're a druid trying to save the world from an evil warlock, that kind of stuff. So the game overall reflects the idea of the movie. You're going around the stages. Collecting items. You have various druid spells you can learn to use. It's a fine platformer. Again, we've been saying there are a lot of episodes, unfortunately, but again, it is what it is. It's just a very average game for what it is. It's like it's not it's not terrible. It's not great. It just kind of is what it is. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those games definitely where it's like the developers got the license for cheap and decided just to use it to make a game. I'm kind of glad nowadays we don't have those like cash grab, shovel grab games like anymore, because most of them were terrible. Not always, but most of them were pretty. But most of them like pretty atrocious. At least this one's playable. So I'll give it. But let's give credit for that. It's also a fairly rare game today. So there is that going for it as well too. So. Then finally, we have another guest spot episode. Doom returned to the podcast to talk about this game. Probably not going to be a shock to anybody when I say that Mega Man X was my favorite game to cover this year. Because where do we even start? Because Mega Man X is like a great game. It's a great. It was a wonderful breath of fresh air into a franchise that Capcom even themselves admitted had gotten stale by that point. And Mega Man X is still beloved and still played today by many folks. A true classic. I would argue Mega Man X2 is a better game, but Mega Man X definitely is a solid game that's still a lot of fun to play today. The PSP remake, yes, yeah. So, yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think so too. Yes. Yeah. 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 So, you know, not really anything like horrible, horrible, horrible. There definitely were some like stinkers, but stinkers. But I think even the worst game in the list. I have to go down the list here to find out exactly which one I hated the most. You know, I hated the you know, yeah. I guess Super Ninja Boy is the game I probably like. It's probably the game I'd give the lowest marks to, but even that game I'd still give like a 4. So I mean, it's like there wasn't even like really horrible games I think this year. So and speaking about games, there's no harm mentioning this. There's no harm saying this now. I already have talked to Doom. He will be joining us again again next year to cover Mega Man X2 and 3 as well. So we can have episodes to look forward to. So before we before we get to our last great game, however, we cover another like pop culture reference. We did a lot of those this year for sure. So this time, where's Waldo? Which is still a thing. It's certainly not as big of a thing as you said. It's but certainly not as big a thing as it was during its heyday, but it is still around. So we covered the Super NES version of the game because there was also like NES version and for other systems as well too. It follows the formula like Where's Waldo very successfully. Like like great graphics, good music. It feels like it feels like a video game version of that hunt, and that's all great. If that's what you want, you definitely have it here. But we also said at the time, it's like, was this really needed? This feels like a cash grab attempt again to cash in the popularity of how popular Waldo was at the time period. It's like there's nothing here special or unique. It's just like another version. It's just basically like more Waldo that really wasn't needed. I mean, it's fine for what it is. If you want more Waldo, then here. But paying full price in this game back in the day would have been a pretty like bad choice, unfortunately, because yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. They tried to add in two difficult. They tried to add in two difficulty levels to be able to make it like accessible to younger gamers as well too. But it doesn't. But it doesn't do anything to doesn't do anything as far as like replay value goes. Unfortunately. So exactly. Yeah. 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 But um, so anyway, as Joe already alluded to, we finished the year on a pretty high note, I think. The classic sports game NHL '94, the Super NES port of it, which is still considered to be one of the best sports games ever made by a lot of people. It's not hard to see why. Like hockey's not changed a lot over the last 3 years, like compared to many other sports. This is still this really blends the balance between like arcade gameplay and simulation gameplay very wonderfully. In a package that looks great, sounds great, and plays very well. Even like 30 years later. So I mean, people still make like Tecmo Bowl. People are still coming out with like roster patches every year. So you get the current team and players in the game. So that again just goes to as proof to show you how popular the game still is. Yes. Yeah, I drew a blank on that for a moment, for a moment because we're actually releasing that on the day we're recording this. So this was interesting. This was interesting to me because I really didn't know too much about WCW. I remember being a rival league of the WWF, but not being a wrestling fan like Joe is. Pretty much my knowledge of it like ended there. So like so this was and this was the only this was the only WCW licensed game to come on the system. So this was interesting. This was a chance to look at a different league and see how they differed. How, who's on the roster, that kind of stuff, and like I did enjoy. There was a lot I liked about the game. I liked the overhead graphical viewpoint. Some people don't, but I thought it was like good. The characters look great. The sprites look great. Again they use pictures and voice effects and and signature moves and whatnot, but. Gameplay wise, unfortunately, it was a letdown. It's a very slow game. It's not. There are better wrestling games on the system, unfortunately. The WCW series definitely got a lot better in the N64 and PlayStation days. Yeah. At least the ones came, at least the ones came out at least the ones came out. They came out like North America. Yeah. I mean, there are some Japanese games like the aforementioned Fire Pro Wrestling games that we certainly could cover. So, yeah. So that was 2024. Joe and I think are going to be pretty similar. Yeah, 25. Yeah. Joe and I think are pretty similar as to what games, as what three games that we enjoyed the most. We're both going to agree upon Mega Man X. We're both we're both going to agree on Sunset Riders. Where I think where I think we differ is that I'm going to give the nod to NHL '94 as being the third game, like my list. Okay, yeah, okay. I'm staying corrected then. Yeah, true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The originals are almost always better. Now, having said that, I will make a case as I just said as I just said a few minutes ago that the Super NES version of Prince of Persia 1 is still great. Is probably still the best classic version of the game to play because of everything they added onto the game. But having said that, all things being equal, the original game's always gonna, trump a port. I do think, well, speaking about like Konami arcade ports, I actually, I prefer playing Turtles in Time Super NES compared to the arcade because I think because I think the differences Konami made the Super NES version of the game are better than the arcade version of the game. But that's a very that's a very Edge unique case also, I think. With that one because the bosses they added the Super NES version of the game are better, I think, but there's no 4-player mode, unfortunately. Unfortunately, just 2. They could have added 4 because the 4-player tap was out, but who knows the logistics of doing that back then. So, but anyway, yeah. Next up in the podcast, we're going to be opening up 2026 with a game that I think I picked at this point. Another like shooter. This was more of a what would you call this? Like not a space shooter because you're not in space. Space like you're on Earth, but I guess you would just call it like an air shooter maybe. But yeah. Yes. Yep. Same here. The game's called. Yep. The game's called Space Megaforce, which again the title makes me wonder: do you go in space at some point in this game? Because at this point, because it is literally called Space Megaforce. So, but yeah, it's a vertically themed shooter. Like think Life Force certain stages of that. Think Tiger Heli was also vertical scrolling. Xevious for any of the really old school arcade people out there. Legendary Wings. Did you ever play that? Was also yeah. So yeah, there's plenty of vertical shooters out there. So it's not as common a perspective as Horizontal is. It has its own pros and cons, which I'm sure we'll get into. We're talking about the game in the podcast, but yeah. I tend to prefer vertical over horizontal if you give me a choice. So I'm very curious to see how this goes, for sure. So, and we will also brainstorm our games for next year as well too. We've already mentioned some we're going to cover for sure. I have some others in mind. I'm sure Joe does as well too. So we'll hash out a hero list. So as always. Thank you very much for listening to us again this year and for listening to this episode. You can find us on Facebook or you can also send me an email directly to the SNES podcast at yahoo.com. Joe, how about yourself? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yes, definitely. So, by time, this would actually be released in 2026. So I hope everybody had a happy holidays. But you'd like a good New Year and best wishes for next year. We'll catch you all again next time. Take care.